All right, everyone. Sorry about that. Had a little bit of mic difficulties there, but we are back and here with another Plebdev workshop. So in this one today, we're going to be going over, just some basics of Nostr and then also diving into the Nostr dev kit, which makes building apps on Nostr quite simple. So yeah, let's just get into it. I got this slideshow here and you will find it at tinyurl.com/ndk-basics. And a link to the final project is here. It's on our Plebdevs GitHub at /ndk-basics as well. So I'll come back to this at the end of the workshop just so you can see it again. Links are also will be in the description. But yeah, let's see what we got here. So there's not really any prerequisites to this. It just depends on how much of it you want to grasp, but everything we're going to be doing is you can just copy and paste if you want. I always recommend, if you're trying to learn how to code, it's really helpful even if you're just copying word for word. Just go through the code that I have written and rewrite it yourself. You'll catch a lot of little things that you didn't realize were happening if you just copy and paste it yourself. So some basic knowledge of JavaScript is nice because that's what we're doing this workshop in is JavaScript. We'll also be using Next.js. If you've ever used React, Next.js is just basically React. That's all we're not using the serverless functions or anything like that. And this is a Nostr workshop, so if you want some links and resources to learn more about Nostr, there's a bunch of, like, this one is just at nostr.how, but there's also nostr.com. Probably, I don't even know. There's a bunch of just Nostr explainer websites. Actually, another one that I'll add in that I forgot about is Awesome Nostr. This has a ton of links. Here you can learn more about mobile clients and web clients, and then here's relay implementations, clients, and I think there's also down here, yeah, there's libraries. So we're going to be using NDK, but if you prefer to code in another language, there's a ton of libraries here to help you get started. And then also, we're going to be going through the NIPs. So I recommend, if you want to start building on Nostr, get familiar with this NIPs repository. This is the spec for Nostr. So we'll go through more what the NIPs are. But this defines basically what Nostr is. So in this slideshow, we're just going to go over some basics. We're going to go through what is Nostr, a few of the NIPs that we'll need to have some familiarity with in order to build our project. That's going to be NIP 1, which just defines how clients and relays work together. And again, we'll go over more what clients and relays are. NIP 07 allows you to have a browser extension to store your Nostr private key, which is essentially, you could think of it as like your password to your Nostr account. NIP 19, if you've ever been on Nostr, shows you how to make everything in Nostr is hex encoded, but when you look on a Nostr client, you see things like note and then a string of numbers, or npub and a string of numbers, and so those are just encodings to help you kind of know what you're looking at. So that's defined in NIP 19. NDK is the Nostr development kit, which we'll be building our project with. And then we'll just briefly go over how to create a new Next.js project. And then in there, we will search for notes and profiles on the Nostr network, as well as update our profile. So Nostr is kind of hard to explain. If you're in Bitcoin, it's kind of the same thing. When someone asks you what is Bitcoin, it's a lot of different answers you could give. So start with, what does Nostr stand for? Notes and other stuff transmitted by relays. If you can't tell from that, it's pretty general. You can kind of send whatever you want as long as it follows a specific event format. it's simple. This is these simple, resilient, and verifiable are from Nostr.how. Nostr is simple. There's one event format. It's resilient. Data storage is distributed. So you can see in this graphic here, we have at the top relays, which are pretty much just dumb servers. They store data, and when you ask for it, they'll give it to you. So you can write to relays and you can read from relays. And different relays have different rules. Some of them make you put some proof of work on your notes before you write to their relay. Some are read only. It's kind of up to the relay operator to decide how they want to set those rules. And so these are the relays. This is the data storage. This is the distributed data storage. And then these are clients down here. So these are individual users, Bob, Alice, and Mary. You can see this says Bob is using Damus, Alice is using Amethyst, and Mary is using Iris, all on different devices, the web, Android, and iOS. And what this graphic doesn't show, if you're familiar with these clients, is they're pretty much Twitter clones. We'll probably go check out Iris in a minute. But these are pretty much just Twitter clones. But Nostr doesn't say like Twitter notes transmitted by relays. It's notes and other stuff. So you can pretty much put whatever you want on these relays as long as they follow the right event format. So this graphic is missing other sort of clients that are on Nostr as well. And then finally, Nostr is verifiable. All of the events are signed by a public key, or I guess all the events have a public key and they're signed by a private key, so you can prove that this note was created by the person that says they created it because it's signed by their private key. So the NIPs, just like in Bitcoin, there's the BIPs. In Nostr, there's Nostr implementation possibilities. I think BIPs is Nostr improvement possibilities. But same idea. It's just a list of specs that aren't necessarily like required. Some of them are required, but these are just different parts of the protocol. So like I said, I definitely get familiar with them. If we go back to the repository, you should, like, if you're kind of just trying to figure out what there is, I recommend down here, you can see this list and it sort of tells you a little bit about what the NIPs are. So sometimes I'm trying to figure out like, oh, I've seen this on another client. I don't know how they do it though. What do I think? Oh, reactions. Yeah, I want to make it so that people can like my posts, and then you can read that NIP, and sometimes they're a little hard to follow, but I'd just recommend implementing them and you'll figure it out. And then also down here are event kinds. So I'll show you the event format, but all events have a kind, and this just kind of defines what an event is, or how to interpret that event. So there's kind 0, which is metadata, so that's like your profile. Kind 1 is short text note, so that's just like a basic, something like you'd see on Twitter. And then there's a ton more. One interesting one is 9735, I think. Oh yeah, 9735 is zaps. So that's how you can basically tell everyone that you sent a Lightning payment. So yeah, it's fun to just kind of read through those and see what you can implement. Today we're just going to go through a few of these. I'll go through these more in detail. Here's links to each of them. But this is what we'll need to build the project. NIP 1 defines the basic protocol. NIP 7 adds a window.nostr object to your browser so that you can interact with the browser extension. And NIP 19, like I was talking about, is the encodings of different data types. So in NIP 1 defines the basic protocol. Part of that is this event format. So this is what a Nostr event has to look like. It has to have this exact format. It has to have an ID. So we'll come back to the ID in a second. It has to have a pub key, So like I said, all events are signed. That's this signature down here. And so you have to sign this event with the private key that corresponds to the pub key attached to this event. Created at is sort of just like you create the event and then you create a Unix timestamp, which is just the number of seconds that have passed since 1970, January 1st. And so you stick that on there. This helps make events unique so they have a different ID, because the ID, so I can just go over what that is. The ID is all of this data serialized. If you want to know exactly how to serialize it, that's defined in NIP1, but we'll just be using a library that makes it so that we don't even have to think about how to create this ID. But it's basically a hash of all the data in here. And so if you put the same data in and have the same timestamp, you'll end up with the same ID, and then you won't be able to find that specific event. So by adding a timestamp, it helps make these IDs unique. The kind, again, determines how the event is interpreted. And so they're all defined in that NIPS repository. But you can also kind of, like, there's some, in NIP1, it defines different ranges of, like, these from 0 to 1,000 mean a certain thing, and from 1,000 to whatever mean another thing. So it's good to follow that, but you can also kind of just mess around with different kinds, and if you want to make it so that you can differentiate events that you're creating from others, and these should then be like, you should implement it, and then if you think it's a good idea, then you can make a PR to the NIPS repository. Tags are sort of extra metadata about the events, so those just kind of like show you references to other events, or if you like, if there's a public key that's mentioned in the event, then you'll tag that there. This is also, there's part of NIP 57, which is zaps, allows you to put multiple zap tags in there, and that will tell the client that, like, if you want to zap this note, you have to zap each one of these tags. And content, it says just an arbitrary string. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. If you want to know how to interpret a certain kind, then go look at the NIPS and find what that kind is. So here's some more on tags. These are some examples. So the first element in a tag, so tags is an array of tags, where a tag is, the first element is a tag name. So in the spec, it says that all lowercase single letter tag names should be indexed by the relay, which means you can tell the relay that you want an event with an E tag of this value, and the relay will give it back to you. But if you say, hey relay, I want an event with a tag that says zap of a certain value, then the relay may not necessarily be keeping track of that in an easy to get fashion, so they might just not respond to you with anything. The second element in a tag is the tag's value, and the third element could be anything. Usually each tag kind of has like a different standard that it follows. NIP1 defines 3 standard tags, E, P, and A tags. So E tags refer to an event by its ID. So this event here is tagged with another event ID. So maybe here, like the alt tag says reply. So this event here is probably replying to the event defined in the E tag. The P tag is for mentioning a pub key. So again, probably this is the pub key of the person that made this event, or sometimes you'll see the pub key tagged if, like, you use the @ like you can say @ username, and then your client will stick that pub key in here, so that then sort of like you can see everything has that pub key tagged in it. And finally, NIP1 defines replaceable events. So we won't go too much into those. We're going to talk about kind zeros, which are replaceable events. But it's basically just saying, I want an event with a certain ID, but the content of the event is going to change. And so if you remember back here, the ID is the hash of whatever's in this event. So if you change this content, it's a different ID, and then you can't find that event again. But with replaceable events, you're saying, okay, I already know that I'm going to change the content of this event, so I'm going to say this is how you find. This string here is going to be how you find the most recent event. So some more on kinds. nip1 defines kind 0 and kind 1. Kind 0 is a metadata event. I like to think of it as like your profile. That's pretty much what it is, but it doesn't have to be like your profile in the traditional sense, but that's what we're going to be using it for today. And it is a replaceable event. So in the spec it says, a relay may delete older events once it gets a new one for the same pub key. Because if you update your profile, then no one cares about the older one. Kind 1 are text notes. So this is kind of what you see most of when you just go around Nostr, especially to like the main Twitter clone clients like Iris and Primal. And the final thing from nip1 that we're going to go over are filters. I think it's the kind. Oh, okay, maybe there's a duplicate there. So yeah, so this is filters. So Nostr uses clients and relays communicate with each other using WebSockets. And so if you're familiar with like a REST API where you say get a certain route, you make a request and then the web server responds, and then you say, okay, cool. Do I want to make another request? Maybe you have to pull for certain data. But with WebSockets, you just open up a connection to the web server. In this case, it's a subscription. And now the web server will stream events to your client. So in this case, your client is connecting to relays, and relays stream whatever information you ask them for. So we call that, what you subscribe to with is a filter. And your filter defines what events the relay should send. So here is everything you can filter for. You can filter for IDs, so specific event IDs. Authors, so these are if you filter for a certain pub key, you put that in authors, and that would be events with that author mentioned here. You can search for certain kinds, so you could just search for every single kind 1 event on Nostr if you want. You can search for tags with this. You do hashtag and then the tag name, single letter. And then you can also add since and until filters. So since would be, I want all the events since a certain timestamp. So events must be newer. Or if you want until, then it would be all the events up until a certain timestamp. So all the events would have to be older than that. And then finally, you can add a limit. I think most relays kind of have a default limit, but also maybe you only want 5 events. So you just say, give me only 5 events. And yeah, so that's pretty much nip1. It just defines how clients and relays talk to each other. nip07 defines this window.nostr object. So I think I have to turn mine off actually real quick, and then we'll go get a. So if you go to, if you go to this link, if you're on the slides, this is nos2x. But also if you go to nip7, I think I put this link somewhere. But if you go to nip7, then at the bottom, you'll see a link to Awesome Nostr, which has a whole list of browser extensions. So what we need for this is a browser extension that allows you to add your I guess all of them probably do, because it says NIPO7 says that the object must define the following methods: get public key and sign event, and then there's some more. So certain browser extensions will define other functions, but these two are required. So you should be pretty much good to go if you get any of these. I haven't really messed with many of them. I like Albi, but you have to create an account to use Albi. So today we're going to use Nostr2x, and I'm just going to disable my Albi extension real quick. There we go. So in the Nostr2x repo, you can get the Chrome extension. And we'll add this. So now you can see we have this little keys thing here. So now we have the browser extension. And let me see. First, I'm going to remove this from Brave just to show you real quick. If we go, so Control-Shift-J, put that here. Control-Shift-J will open up your console. And here, see, we do window.nostr and it's undefined. So let's add Nostr2x to Brave. Now it's added, and let's see window.nostr. Need to reload possibly. Well, that's awkward. Let's see if we set it up first. Okay, it says you don't have a private key. Use the options page to set one. So right click on your extension, go to options. And so if you already have a private key, so this extension is just, see, maybe it even has a description. It's a Nostr signer extension. It allows you to sign Nostr events on web apps without having to give them your keys. So it's a good practice to get a browser extension and put your private key in here. That way you don't have to go and copy and paste it into a bunch of clients. We've been talking about clients. We'll get there soon. But for this example, I'm just going to generate a fresh private key. So if you have one, you can copy and paste it in there. We will save that. And now that that is saved, I was wondering maybe we needed to add the, so not sure why it's not showing up. Because it should. We have, it says our public keys here. So if this doesn't work, I might go to, see, I'm going to open up Chromium. That's what I was doing this one earlier, and that worked. But basically what this browser extension should do, your window object is an object that exists in any web browser, and it has a bunch of different properties on it. And so this is kind of just, I don't know, you could do, like, if you want local storage, this is how you store things in the browser, is with local storage, and you get to local storage with the window object. But let's see, I opened this up. We should see I have Nostr2x here, and so now still undefined. This was just working. Window. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna try one more thing. I'm gonna turn Albi back on. Okay, well, if I can't get this to work, then that will be unfortunate. Okay, let's make sure we're doing this right. NIPO7 says there should be a window.nostr object. we have both of these browser extensions now. Sorry about this, y'all. Hopefully, let's see. Disable Albi. We've got Nostr2x here. I'm just going to close everything. Restart my browser. So maybe it just... Yeah, get public key is not defined. Let's see what happens if we go... This is the next step. We go to Iris. So iris.2 is a really easy web client to use. Whoops. Sign out of this. Let's say Nostr extension login. Okay, so this is working. So this is what's supposed to happen. See, we say, how do we want to log in? We want to log in with the Nostr extension, and then this pops up, and you can see here, Nostr2x is calling get public key. So now there's window.nostr. I don't know enough about browser extensions to know why that is, but we created, right click on your browser extension, go to options, and you can generate a new private key. So we're starting fresh. We're logging into Iris with, let's see, where's my Git? Yeah, there we go. So I'm gonna authorize just this. So now I'm logged into Iris with that private key I generated. And this is just an account that basically doesn't exist right now. So we just created a random number, which is all the private key is. So I'm gonna go to edit profile and set my username. Let's see, I know a really good place to get profile pictures. If you search cool profile picture, then the cool thing about Nostr too is you just put a picture URL in there. So we can just get this image address, stick that in there. So this is our cool profile picture, and we'll set our bio. So now we have a Nostr profile. Sometimes it's kind of weird. So in order to save to update your profile, you need to send a new event to the relays, and sometimes it's asking for, here we go. Let me just close all these. I have a bunch of these that keep popping up. And so what we need to do, yeah, okay. So it should, what should be happening is here, this is popping up. It's just not showing up in front. This is saying like, can Iris sign this new kind0 event with the private key you have? So I'm going to say on Iris, I'm going to authorize kind0 forever. And we'll just recreate our bio. And so now that we've given Iris permission to sign this kind0 event, it should be good to go. So now we've just created a profile. So now that we have this profile, we're going to go through a few more things and then get into actually writing some code to find this profile on Nostr and then update it. So let's get back to our slideshow. But what I wanted to show you with that slide was just that if you do Control-Shift-J, you can get to window.nostr. All these errors. once you have it's a browser extension set up, and then you'll see there's these functions defined on there. And here you can see that too. So a challenge here for you is get your public key from your browser extension. So if you'll see, this function has a get public key, or this Nostr object has a function called get public key. So see if you can mess around with that. Also, maybe see what these other functions do. And finally, NIP19 is just a way of encoding the hex data so that it's human readable. So like if we go back to Iris and we copy our user ID, and then if we paste it, what it looks like is it starts with npub. And so this is saying this is my pub key. It's your Nostr pub key. But if you remember back here, pub key is a 32-byte lowercase hex encoded. And so when you do, I actually have a slide all about that. Everything is hex encoded in raw events. So when you're actually communicating with relays, you want to make sure everything is hex. So your pub key that you put in will be hex, but when you show things to your client or to your users, you will fetch 32 encode them. And for public keys, they have this npub is the prefix. If you want to learn more about encoding, here's a link to a Base 58 YouTube video, which I highly recommend. And then there's even an Udemy course that goes more into Bitcoin transactions that this is kind of like a precursor to. But I definitely recommend that if you want to learn more about what this Fetch32 is all about. And yeah, so why does it keeps hopping over to my other window? That's okay, we'll stay here. Yeah, so we're talking about Nostr Dev Kit today. Here's a link to the repo. It's kind of a big repo with a lot of different things going on in it. So there is a React library, which we're not going to use today, but could be interesting to check out. The main library is here, and there's sort of some different libraries you can get within here. Like if you want to have a cache, you can use this NDK Redis cache for on the server side, and then this Dexy cache for the client side in the browser. But today we're just going to be using NDK, and so you can see here install is at npm add at nostr-dev-kit/ndk. It's basically a library for building Nostr apps, and it takes care of all the hard stuff like managing your relays and signing events and creating event IDs and all of those things. There's not too much documentation. I put this link here. I recommend going through this. What's in here is basically the same functionality we'll be adding, but there's some more examples. So if you kind of want to see a little bit of what you can do, that's in here. But I'm gonna show you here. I say once you've installed it, go to node modules and then find that library. And if you go to this index.d.ts, this is in TypeScript where all of the types get defined. And I find this to be a very helpful place for figuring out how functions work and what parameters they take, which parameters are optional, which ones are required, etc. So we'll go through some of that to see how you get there. And we're using Next.js to create our app, so we'll just go through that right now. If you open up a terminal, all you have to do is say npx create next app at latest, and that should just start to create one for you. And while we let that go, everything else is just going to be over in the repository. So go to pleb-devs/ndk-basics, and you will get to the repository for this project, which just has everything you need to copy and paste and get it going. I think I already have one called NDK Basics. Create this. We'll say no on TypeScript, yes on ESLint, no on Tailwind, yes on source directory, and no on app router. No on import alias. That will create that for us. Sure why this isn't loading. All right, so here is, I wonder, is this link wrong? No, that looks right. Anyways, here's the repo, and here I have, I'll cd into there, and then if you have VS Code installed, you can just do code dot, and you open this directory in that, or open this directory in VS Code. So this is just a template of Next.js. So we'll have to go through and clean it up a little. So here's where we'll be working in pages, and then in index.js. You could just clear that out, clear this out, and then everything in between these main tags we're just going to get rid of. So now we've got this, and we're not using this image component anymore, so we can get rid of that. So you'll see, if you're ever looking at a project with a package.json, usually there's these scripts defined here. So what we want to do is run dev. So we'll use npm run to say that that's the script we want to run, and then the script name is dev. And it says I'm using the wrong node version, so I'm not going to go over this right now, but nvm is a cool little tool called, it stands for Node Version Manager. And so if you want to do nvm use node, this will say basically use the latest version of Node, which is what that error was about. So now we should be able to do npm run dev and get this going. So now what that means is that our app is running at localhost 3000. And while that loads up, we'll go through here. So this is what we're going to end up building. It's going to be a search bar and some fields to update our profile. So this is obviously very bare bones, but just kind of shows you two basic pieces of functionality, and there's a lot to expand on here. Like, you can apply the same logic of updating a profile to creating a post. So we're gonna clean out index.js, which we already did, clean out the home module CSS file, and then we're going to create some components, a search component, of an event component for rendering events, and an update profile component, which is this here. So I'm just going to copy and paste. Oh yeah, so here, so this is what we did first, right? Was we kind of just like cleared everything out. But then we have this NDK import. So what we're actually going to need to do first is install the necessary libraries. So that's Nostr devkit /ndk and Nostr tools. So open up a new terminal, install those, and while that's happening, we'll say, I'm just going to copy all of this into our index.js file now, and then we'll go through everything else. So this was just cleanup. Then we imported this NDK class, and here we create one single instance of NDK. NDK manages kind of all your relay connections and events that it's already seen before. So they recommend in the docs create one instance, or they say that you should create one instance of NDK and use that everywhere else to when you want to use NDK. So first we're going to need to tell it some relays to connect to. So here I just picked two popular ones, the Damus relay and the Primal relay. An interesting experiment is to mess around with what happens when maybe you publish an event to one relay and then delete that and subscribe to another one. See if you can find that event again, or just see what kind of different events you might get from different relays. So we define that here just as an array. And then we're saying NDK is a new instance of NDK where we pass the explicit relay URLs, this array of relays. And then finally, we need to actually connect them. So we use this connect function, ndk.connect. And this will just say once it's connected, we'll log that or we'll handle any errors. And then here we export NDK from this file so we can import it elsewhere. I think this isn't maybe next best practice for Next or React. There's some like use context and use ref functions that may be better to handle this, but this is just kind of a straightforward way of creating one instance of NDK and then making it importable into other files. So now in here, now that we have this going and our app is still running, there's an error there because we need to, oh yeah, see we're logging NDK connected. Or if we open up here, Control-Shift-J again opens up your browser console, and when we reload, we'll get this NDK connected. So now that's pretty much the hardest part, is we have a new NDK instance, and then in the background, it's connecting to these relays. And so now I'm just gonna copy all this into our CSS file, get that taken care of. Just find some basic styles. And then here we're gonna create this search component. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this and we'll go through that. If you want, you can create a page or a components directory, but I'm just going to keep this all in here for simplicity. So let's go through what this search is doing. Maybe real quick. We don't have a event yet, so I'm going to comment this out. Real quick, let's just see what that added to our app. We need to, if we want it to show up, we export it here, but we never actually imported. Import search. How do you do this? Pages. You can't tell. I don't really use Next very much. Pages/search. There we go. And so now that needs to go in here. And so now it should be rendering. So it reloads. And so now we have this search bar. And what we can do now, we already have my npub here, is we can stick that in here and we get this search result. So we can see our search filter. Remember we talked about filters. This is what you subscribe to relays with. Our search filter is the hex pub key, and we're searching for kind 0 because kind 0 is the profile metadata. And then this is the response event that we get back. You can see the content has my name, another ostrich. So let's see how that actually happened. In the search component, let's see, what are we doing here? So we're importing NDK from our index file, and we're importing nip19, which is just some helper functions from Nostr tools. And what happens here, this is what actually is getting rendered to the screen. And so you can see here, this is our heading that said search. We have this input field. Our value is equal to input, which we define up here. So we're just defining that to start as an empty string. And you need to do this basically, like, you want that value to show up in the input field, but you want it to be able to change. And so how you do that is you use this onChange event listener. And whenever there's a change event within that input, then this set input function will get called with the new value, setting input to that value, and then showing that in here. So it's a little confusing if you haven't used Next or React, but this is how you do it if you want to get the variable from that input. And then we're saying on click, we call this handle search function. We actually don't need to pass it input, but we call it handle search on click of the button. So that's this search button. So what happens is we call handle search, and what search will do is get this result as the return of this search function, and you can see that's what we ended up logging in the console. So search takes a query, and here I say right now it only takes note or npub. So you should, here's a to-do for you to do. Throughout this repo, I added some to-dos. So if you want to control F for those, then some extra challenges there for you. But right now it just takes notes and npubs. And so you can pass that into this function, and then it will try to search Nostr for it. So here we define our filter as an empty object, and we'll create a filter depending on what we're looking for. And down here, we're saying if the query starts with npub, that means we're looking for a public key, or we're looking for a profile. And so we use nip19 to decode it, and that gets us the pub key. So this decoded npub is an object that has a data attribute, and definitely make sure you log this when you're messing around with it, because different encodings have kind of different object formats. At least last time I was messing with it, but if you decode npubs and notes, you end up with a data attribute that will be the actual value that you want. And so then what we set our filter equal to is, for this, if we're looking for a profile, we set it equal to a kind0 filter. And here, if we're looking for a note, we send it to an event ID filter, because this note will just be the event ID encoded in Bech32. And so here's another to do. If you want to try to search for this profile along with like their feed, so any kind1 events that they've posted, that would be an interesting challenge. So we'll look here just briefly. This is what a kind0 filter will be. Kinds is 0, obviously, and then authors, that kind0 is going to be authored by whatever pub key you're searching for. And then if you just want to search directly by ID, this is how you do it. You just pass in an array of IDs. So that's what we got down here was the search filter. So if we go, our search filter here was authors and kind0s, but if we wanted to, let me open up trending. How do we get to some more notes here? Well, let's create a note. So this, we're publishing. Again, our browser extension is asking us. I'm just gonna authorize that one, and then let's see if we can copy this node ID and search for it here. So this is creating a different filter. And down here, we're just looking for this ID, and then we end up getting a search result. And finally, that search result is what we're returning, and that comes from NDK. So NDK has a function called fetch event. Fetch event, if you hover over it, you can see, if you're using VS Code or another IDE that supports this, you can see sort of what this function expects. Like I said, there's not that much documentation. There's just kind of examples. So what I find the best thing to do is check this out, fetch event. Okay, what does it take? It takes an ID or a filter, which is of type string. So this is some TypeScript stuff here. We're saying this parameter ID or filter takes a string, or, which is what this bar means, an NDK filter for a certain, and that extends a certain NDK kind. And so right now we're searching with this filter, but we could also search just directly by ID if we wanted to. We could just pass in the event ID. And so there's we can just go here. So this node modules path right here is going to be in node modules. But you could also just copy what I had there and say code and then open it up, and it'll open up that file. So like I was saying, maybe it's helpful if I just go there so you can see. When you install a library, it ends up in node modules. And this is the code that you're importing. And so if you go to dist, and then there's just a few files. All of these libraries will look different depending on how they're compiled and built, but this is how NDK looks. And so all of the actual logic is defined in this .js file, but the typings are defined in index.d.ts. So remember we saw fetch event takes NDK filter. So I'm just showing you this because it's really helpful to figure out how to use certain functions. Like if you want to know what functions there are, start by typing NDK. And like if I hover over NDK, it'll show me that it's of type NDK. It's that class. And when you start typing it, then you'll get all these. And so you could search through index.js of the library and find the NDK class and then see what functions are defined on it. But this is just a handy trick with your code editor. So we can see one of the functions is fetch event. And fetch event, when we start to do that, takes type of NDK filter. So then this is how I'm like, okay, I want to fetch an event. It needs an NDK filter. Usually you can right click on any instance of it and say go to type definition. And so now we know exactly what this function is expecting. Because it's expecting a NDK filter, we have to pass it an object that looks like this. And this should look familiar. This should look like what the filter is defined as in nip01. So yeah, this is just helpful for, like, if you wanted to know, okay, what are NDK kinds? Go there. They're all defined in this file, so you can control F for them too, but sometimes there's a lot of instances. And so we're going to be using this NDK kind metadata, and that's kind 0. So anyways, just a little trick there. So that's what we're calling this fetch event function, which takes a filter and ID and returns an event. There's also fetch events, which will return basically a set or an array of events that match that filter. If there's only one event that matches, then it'll only return one, but maybe if you search for all kind ones, then you'll get a bunch of kind ones. So yeah, so then we just we're returning that event, and we're setting the NDK event to that result. So I hope that makes sense. Basically, you input an npub or a note, and then you use NDK to fetch it. And we kind of had to do some logic in here to create the filter, depending on what we're searching for. And so now that we have our NDK event set, let's actually render that event in. So if we go back here, we have this search, and then And this is just saying that we should import it to index.js. And here we can create another component called event. And in here, this is just kind of, right now, really only renders kind zeros. But you could make it be able to define or render whatever you want. So this component takes an event of the event kind should be, or I guess it's not the kind of the event, but like the type that we pass in there should be an NDK event. So you'll actually see, I think I might start doing some workshops in TypeScript because I think it's just really helpful to get an idea of, or it just helps you write more clear code and understand what's going on. But you'll see here, if we hover over search, what it's returning is a promise because it's an async function of type NDK event. So then when we get the result from search and we set NDK event, we're setting it to a type of NDK event. And down here, when we render in this event component, we're passing in NDK event. So just good to keep track of like kind of what format of objects you're passing where. And TypeScript helps you do that explicitly. But anyways, with this, we are just returning if there's an event, which is what this means. Basically, like this double and operator means if there's an event, then execute this other thing. If there's not an event, then don't execute that. So once we pass event in, then we'll call render event and render the return value of that. So render event, again, takes this event. And if the event kind is 0, we know how to parse that. We will parse the name, our picture, and the about section. And it says in nib01, which I had a comment about, but I deleted that. But it says in nib01 that the event content, which is just a piece of the event, is for a kind 0, is the JSON stringified object of their profile. So we'll see more of what that means exactly when we update our profile. But basically what we need to do to get the data is use json.parse. So we take that event content and parse it. And you'll actually see here, let's search for our npub again. You'll see here, if we search for it, the search result has content. And so this is like almost an object, but it's got all these escape characters and quotes, and that's like stringified JSON. So we can parse it and then get those fields from there. Otherwise, if we don't know how to parse it, we will just stringify the event. And so that just takes, NDK has this raw event function on it. So rather than all this stuff, we can use raw event, and you'll see what that looks like in a second. But yeah, that should be pretty much it. So if it's kind 0, show that. Otherwise, we just kind of show the object. So this should be, it's all white text, I guess. But this should be searching for, should get our npub of kind 0. So let's see why this isn't working. Yeah, just give it a good old refresh. Sometimes that'll do the trick. Did I take it out? Okay, here's event. Saying NDK event gets that. And let's see what happens when we go in here. And log the event. Am I still running? This was working. Always the case. Just gonna import this use effect so that I can see. Use effect is basically like if it helps you run things, run functions over and over. So we just wanna console.log the event, and we don't need any of this stuff. And what this array here means is if the event object changes, then run this use effect. Something here is not right. We're passing in, so we're getting search result, and then what should be happening is we should be setting in handles search, we're logging. Looks like for some reason I deleted that. So this should be, let's make sure I have that right in here. I might have just, yeah, for some reason I accidentally deleted that. So if you copy it exactly like it is in the repo, then it should be setting NDK event, which will then change that value and run that use effect. And you'll also get your profile rendered here. And so you'll notice we don't have our picture in there. But I'm curious. Sometimes you have to like resave, because I noticed over here. Yeah, there we go. Like let's see if we can look at one of these older ones. The event content was just my name. So the relay somehow hadn't gotten those other fields. So by clicking save again, I broadcast a new event with my full profile. So yeah. So basically, by clicking search, we searched for our kind 0, and then we passed it to that event component, which then allows it to be rendered. So pretty much in an hour here, but we just have one more piece, which is the ability to update our profile. So all that we really did with NDK before, like this is kind of just all logic and making it so that we can set the inputs and have buttons to click and all that stuff. But the only NDK function that we called was ndk.fetchEvent. And that's really what makes NDK special, is that you just have to call this fetch event function. You've already connected to your relays, and it just works, which is nice. And I'm going to try one thing before we move on. If you go to, well, I'll just show you. I haven't tried it in here. I've only tried it in Node.js. But if you say export debug equals ndk and then this star, which means everything, then we're turning on debugging, and when we run, we may get some debugging output. Oh, I think we need to actually, yeah, let's look at, oh no, here we go. See, we get some NDK output. So we got our NDK pool, it connected to 2 relays. We see that these are the 2 relays it's connected to, and you'll see also when we search, we need our npub again. when we search, I think what I was thinking is I think I can put that in the browser console, but that's fine. Maybe I do need to put it in the browser console. So if we go to the repo, I think it'll tell us Nostr dev kit. Oh. There's another repository, but it's not the one that we want. Nostr-dev-kit is the one we want. It says, yeah, okay. So see, it says in the server side, use this, but in the browser, we can enable it by saying, copying this. And what does it say? Can we just say, by writing in the dev tools console? Okay, I guess. Not sure how to use that. I've never used it in the console before. Is there like a debug? Anyways, what this would show you is more information. Like what events it's fetching in the filter. But that's only just a slightly interesting thing. Let's move on to creating update profile. So this is going to be the final component that we create. We'll just copy that from here. And I added a lot of comments and links to all this, so you should go back through and click those links. And this is really just a high level overview of everything that's going on. But there's a lot more to it. So we're importing update profile, and then we are just rendering it there. So that will get us this. So, now that we did that, we have some debug output. Let's see if we can get it to show us what we want. Yeah, there we go. So we can see we created a new subscription, and then we received from both of those, and then this end of stream event means that the relay basically said, okay, I'm sending you a bunch of data, and now that's the stream, and then it's ended. There's nothing more that I'm sending you. So then what we can do with update profile is update our profile. It's pretty straightforward. So let's just go through the code and then we can demo it. So again, we're importing that same NDK instance and then some different items from the library, the NDK library. And these are the three fields that we're going to add: the username, about, and picture. NDK supports different signers. One of them is a NIPO7 signer. Remember, NIPO7 is the browser extension we went over. So here we're creating a new instance of NIPO7 signer. But there's also a private key signer. Again, if you just go here, maybe, and say signer. Here we can see there's an NDK signer. There's going to be a ton of them. But we can also, actually, a ton may be hyperbole, but there will be quite a few. And here we define NIPO7 signer. And anyways, with this signer, we're able to sign events, which we need to do to create new ones. This update function will only update these three properties, but your profile could have more than that. So another to do is to expand the functionality of this function to add, or this component itself, to add more data to your profile. We create a new event, by calling new NDK event. NDK event is a class, and you want to pass it NDK. This isn't required. You can see again, hover over there, we get NDK is optional, and then the event is optional as well. So I started by just passing it a kind of NDK kind.metadata, which is kind 0. And the other thing we need is the content. And so remember, for a kind 0, the content is, this is where I put it, set to a stringified JSON object. And there's some certain parameters that are defined in the spec, like name, about, and picture. And you should try to follow those naming conventions when you're creating a kind 0. So what we're going to do down here is collect these three things the same way we do with the search bar, and set the username, about, and picture, and then just stringify those into the content, and then we will sign it. And notice the event, remember I said here that all fields are required, and these are all the fields that are in an event. And here, all we defined was kind, content, and that's it. So we're missing the other the five fields. But NDK is able to fill those in. When we call sign and pass in the signer, that's going to use our browser extension. And from there, it'll be able to get the pub key, and the created at, it can just say like whatever the unique timestamp is now. And then tags, we're not adding any tags, so it doesn't need to add that. And so then it's got everything covered, and then it can generate the ID itself. So we'll check out this. Let's see what these two things log. So here we got the unsigned one, and then after we sign it, we'll see. So, and we'll just redo our profile. We'll use the same really cool profile picture. Click update. We're going to get this request from our NIPO 7 browser extension, and we will authorize just this one. Actually, I should have read what that request was for, was to get our pub key. And so now it has our pub key, and now what it's asking to do is sign this event. So you can see what the event that it actually wants to sign is. Can I zoom in on this for you? So this is what it's saying. This looks right. This is the content that we added. And then there's some things that are filled in here. Create, pub key, ID. So I'm going to authorize just this. So you can see here, before we sign it, all that we have on there is the content and the kind. But then when we call sign, NDK is able to fill in everything else. And we didn't say any tags, which is kind of the only thing it couldn't come up with on its own. But then it can get the pub key from your browser extension and set the created at, hash it, get this ID, and sign it. So let's finish up going through how this component works. I mean, I guess that's pretty much it. But now that we have a signed event, we publish it. So remember, we passed in our NDK instance up here. When we created a new event, we passed in this NDK instance, which we defined relays on and connected to them. So this NDK instance is already connected to relays. It knows which relays we want to publish to. So when we call .publish, then it's using that NDK instance to publish to those two relays we defined. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. We could look more at what this publish takes, because see, it takes an optional parameter of NDK relay set. So let's go look at that real quick, and then I think we'll wrap up. So here we could create a new NDK relay set if we wanted, and it takes a set of NDK relays, and NDK relays are pretty much, I have a constructor on here. Yeah. This constructor gets called whenever you create a new NDK relay. So this would be something like, let's go real quickly, check out Coracle. It's actually, so I'm not logged in. Well, actually, I am logged in. Let's see, I haven't used Coracle in a minute. How do we can see, well, okay, when we want to post, then down here, you can pick note settings, select which relays to publish to. So this is where this NDK relay set might be useful. If you wanted to add an option like this, where the user gets to pick only publish to the relay, the DOMIS relay, then you would say in here you would have to create a new relay set and pass that in to publish. And then that event would only get published to that one relay, but by default we are just doing it to the relays we defined here. So yeah, there's also other signers. If you wanted to have a static private key, we can check out, kind of sidetracking here, but there's a ton in this library, and so I recommend you just explore it, and it probably has the functionality that you want. Here we say there's a private key signer, and the constructor takes a private key. So you could also sign your events with a static private key, but I think if you're building a web client, like Iris or something like that, it's kind of nice to let people copy and paste their private keys in, but if you can, force them to use a browser extension, because I think it's just better practice. That's just me anyways. And yeah, so we'll go quick recap through everything that we did. We created these two components, search and update. And this is probably the most important part here, where we imported NDK and created one single instance of NDK with these two relays defined. And then we exported that so that we can use it in our other components. And then in the search component, we created a search bar that accepts a query. And right now that function only can be, or it only accepts queries that start with note or npub. If you pass in something else, it'll probably not work, or you won't get a filter. So you could expand that if you want to, but all that we're doing is we use the NIP19 helpers from Nostr tools to decode that data and create our filter depending on which prefix there was. We use NDK to fetch the event, and once the event is fetched, then we set our NDK event to the fetched event, which then gets rendered in this event component. And remember, kind zeros, the content is a stringified JSON, so we can parse that out and show that however we want. And actually, this I didn't get to show, because I think this is kind of cool. Like that had a color that I liked. There we go. That's good. That'll maybe show us. Let's see. I think if we do 0, 0, 0. No, we want our background. Yeah, I think this will do it. So let's fetch our note real quick, like. And you can see we're basically saying, like, we don't know how to render this, so let's do this. And this shows the whole event content. And so this could even be kind of like a helpful little tool for you if you're building something and you want to see what you actually end up creating, or you're like, oh, how did Coracle get their events to show up like that? You can just go to your feed and copy an event ID, and if it's on one of those relays we've subscribed to, like let's see, we can see this is on Thomas right there. So I'll copy this event ID and paste it in here, and let's see what this one looks like. This is a kind one, content of GM. Nothing very interesting. Sometimes they have tags. Like if we look at, this guy had comments. Let's look at one of the replies and search for that. See, this has some tags, so it'd be interesting to see where these tags came from. But yeah, so that's how we're just rendering this as code of the stringified event. And then finally, to update your profile, we have these three inputs that take these parameters. And then with those, username, about, and picture, we're able to create a new NDK event, stringify that content, and then sign it. And this is an important part, having a signer. There's kind of depends on like how you use them, depends on which signer there is, which signer you're trying to use. And a lot of them also, like if you wanted, you could pass this signer in NDK, new NDK constructor, takes NDK constructor params, and if we search here for what NDK constructor params are, it takes all of these things. You can figure out what those do if you want, but it also takes a signer. So this is the signer you want to use by default. So we could have defined that in here if we wanted to. And then, yeah, we just published it to the relays. So that was a quick hour and 20-minute intro to Nostr and NDK. I'll probably do a more in-depth workshop on NDK, and not so much the Nostr stuff, but just kind of more how to use NDK, how to create persistent subscriptions, and so on. But yeah, I think this library is really powerful, and it just is a little hard to figure out. But look through this type file, see what looks interesting, and just try things out. The cool thing about Nostr is you get instant access to this whole network that already exists. We just pulled a random note, and we were able to search for it in something that we made. And we also are able to, like if we go to our profile here, it's actually already updated, but our name at first was another Nostridge, and we had a different bio, and then we're able to publish it, and it shows up on all these clients. If we searched for this npub on Coracle, we'd see it as well. So building on Nostr is really powerful. It has Lightning integrated into it, so if you want to check out NIP57, you can start zapping people, and it's just fun to mess around. A little different than Bitcoin because you're not dealing with money. So if you want to break things, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Just see what you can build. So hope you guys enjoyed. That was the Nostr Dev Kit Basics Workshop. See you next time.